Welcome back, everyone, to Rudy's Roundtable. I have a very special guest with us today, Nammy Sirur, who is a speaker and communication coach. Welcome to the podcast, Nammy.
Thank you, Rudy. Thanks for having me.
I know that we first connected through Toastmasters, and that has been such an amazing group to be a part of.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can kind of illuminate us first on who you are and how you got to Toastmasters.
Sure. So I'm Nammy Sirur. Full name is actually Namrata, but I wish people could say Namrata, but no one can. And there was one workplace where on my first day, my boss was like, I'm going to take you to 50 cubicles and introduce you to everyone. And by cubicle number 5, when she was like, this is Namrata, everyone was like, huh? And so I was like, I can't do this. Just call me Nammy. So since then, it's stuck. But what was the question?
Who you are, so we know you never Namrata, and how you got to Toastmasters.
So I've had a pretty sort of just a very sort of not a very linear path to anything in life. And so when I joined Toastmasters, it was at a point in my life where I had just started a business a few years before. So long story, very long. Preface to the story. I grew up, I'm Indian, spoiler alert, if you can't tell by the accent. I know, shocker. I went through a lot of my life thinking that I had to follow this very prescribed path. And at some point in 2015, I watched a TED Talk that changed my life. And it started with the words, most of us are doing our jobs out of fear. And I was like,
wow.
Oh my God, that is me. And so it took literally those 16 minutes and 44 seconds to change the entire course of my life. And I was like, I need to quit my work. I need to quit my corporate life and reboot. And so I left my corporate work. I was like, I'm going to finally figure out what I'm naturally good at. And that put me on a path to working lots of different odd jobs, but lots of things in social media. I eventually became a YouTuber, then a after YouTube, I became a video marketer because my partner and I made 100 videos in a year and a half. People started to notice and ask us to make videos for them. So then we started this video marketing agency.
Amazing achievement, by the way. Can we just recognize that?
And so then from there, at the time, I lived in Houston and my partner was like convinced that we needed to move to Austin, which I also agreed because there was just such a better infrastructure here for that. So she moved here and I was commuting back and forth. So every week I would sort of be in Houston for the weekend and then come here for the week. But I constantly felt pulled in two directions because my ex-husband and my whole family were back in Houston. My work and some part of my social life was here, but I was constantly in two directions. And I just wanted at that point something that I could call my own and some semblance of, okay, this is just for me. And I did this one, I remember I did a panel, I was part of a panel discussion once and I thought I was an amazing public speaker because I was like, I'm on camera every week and I'm a rabid extrovert. So of course I'm good at public speaking. And then I did this panel, whatever event, and turned out that nobody came up and talked to me after, and I did not make a splash at all. So my partner who was filming the panel the whole time said, dude, I think you need to do Toastmasters. And I was like, you know what? I think I do because I never want to feel this feeling again.
Yeah.
Like I never want to feel like I'm not, like my words aren't making an impact. And so that was when I joined Toastmasters and I was like, oh, these are my kind of weirdos. And then I've stuck with it for 6 years now. And it's, even though I'm now a professional public speaker, I still feel like I learn something new every week. So yeah.
What you use a great word, circuitous or like circuitous?
It's sort of, yeah, circuitous, yeah.
Right? Path to Toastmasters and the journey.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that, yes, that feeling of after speaking and you recognize that the audience did not really feel that impact that you were hoping to create. There are moments like that that really motivate you to take that step. And I see that you really jumped in headfirst into Toastmasters. I know you also served as Toastmaster president for a little bit. What inspired you to do that? And like, when was that in your Toastmaster journey?
It was, funnily enough, really early on. It was literally a year after I joined.
Wow.
So I was still relatively new. I had never served on the board before. So this is actually not recommended. But what happened was I joined in 2019 in like October, I think was when I became an official member. 2020, the pandemic happened, so we went virtual. And at that point, I loved Toastmasters. And so I showed up every week consistently, no matter what. And when we went virtual, we had a lot of people drop. And so the club numbers, it was really sparse. And we were sort of really reaching. We were trying to fill even roles every week. And it was a real challenge. So at that point, I think the board just really appreciated the fact that I was there every week and I was sort of trying to shepherd other people through it. And at the same time, the fact that I had video experience, because I was very much running my video marketing agency at the time. So they felt like those two things were a big plus. And I think just personality wise, they were like, okay, you're able to get people to you're able to galvanize people. Yeah. And so out of the blue, they were like, would you consider serving as president? And I was like, what? I've never done anything on this board. But it was just, that's what they needed in the moment. And so and so I ended up serving for 2 terms. So the first term we were virtual, and then I ended up sort of ushering us back into in-person. And it was kind of a bumpy ride. I wasn't an ideal president. I think were I to serve now, it would be so much better. But still, I think that's what they needed in that moment.
I think it worked out too. I mean, the fact that you were even willing to go for it and then serve 2 terms, plus the serendipitous nature of having the video experience while everything was going virtual, it sounds like you were the right person at the right place in the right time. When you mentioned just now about being in Houston and commuting to Austin, I had a very similar experience with my hometown of Sherman and living in Denton, which is about an hour away.
Okay.
And kind of going back and forth. But I think it reflects a larger point, which I think we both feel in some regard, of almost living in 2 different cultures at the same time.
Yeah.
In your case, Indian culture and American culture. In my case, Latin American, Mexican culture and American culture. And I know this is a big part of your journey, your story. Kind of share for me, growing up, what was it like? What's it like in living in those 2 spaces and trying to reconcile that?
Yeah. I think that's such a big and defining part of my story. I lived in India, in Bombay, until I was 12. And then one day, my sister and I came home from school and we had this blackboard in our, we had this tiny little apartment in Bombay. And we had this sliding door that my parents had painted with blackboard paint or whatever, and turned it into a blackboard. And we closed the sliding door and it said America on it in big letters. And so my sister and I saw that and burst into tears because we were like, no, we don't want to move. And so my dad was like, y'all, I got a job in the US and we're moving. And of course, in hindsight, that ended up being the best decision because also, it was what they needed and we weren't very well off in India. So we ended up moving to the States. And for us, I think about this so much now as an adult and being an aunt and, just once you're the adult in the room, you start to have a different perspective on it. But as a kid moving, I was completely traumatized by that experience because we moved to Cleveland, Ohio, which completely different from Bombay, India, in every way imaginable, including the weather. That was the first thing. Bombay is like Houston weather, but more. It's like hot, humid, tropical weather. And then going from there to like the middle of a snowstorm in Cleveland, Ohio, which it was so something I'd never even imagined. And so I'd never seen snow. We arrived in February in the middle of a snowstorm. And then the first things that stuck out to me was just the quiet, because Bombay is just sensory overload. It's just like sights and sounds and chaos all the time. It's like New York on steroids. And so going from there to like this sleepy town in Cleveland where I couldn't hear a single rickshaw, I couldn't hear a single kid playing outside, I couldn't hear a sparrow crowing outside. I was just like, where are those familiar sounds? And so it was just that crushing isolation the first few months. And it took me actually a while to get adjusted because this was the 90s. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of information back and forth between the 2 countries. So we didn't really, I mean, the only thing I knew about the US was Archie comics and Jurassic Park. So not...
Huge fan of Archie comics, by the way.
Yes, the best. Oh my gosh. And so I was like, why aren't we just like eating hamburgers every day and partying at like pop dates or whatever? I know, where's Jughead? So yeah, am I a Betty or a Veronica?
Yeah.
So it was just like nothing. It didn't resemble anything that I thought of when I thought of America. And I think the biggest thing was, and I've talked about this at Toastmasters too, just being an immigrant is like, I make this analogy to a sandcastle. It's like, pretend you're in a sandcastle building competition, right? And you're at this beach, it's going well, the whistle blows and you start building your sandcastle and everything's going great. And you're like, I have a shot at winning. I'm really good at this. I know what I'm doing. 3/4 of the way through, a kid runs by and like knocks over your sandcastle and breaks your tools. So now you're looking around, you're like, oh my God, am I ever going to catch up? Because all your competitors are forging ahead. They're putting their finishing touches on their masterpieces. And meanwhile, you're sitting here wondering, okay, if the judges come by, what am I going to tell them? They're just going to see a pile of rubble. Will they believe me if I say, I promise I was really good if you just came by 10 minutes ago? And so you're wondering, okay, how do I ever catch up, and can I ever catch up? And I make that analogy to, that's what it's like to be an immigrant in a new country, especially if you're an immigrant from a certain part of the world coming to the US, because you feel like everything you knew from your home country, everything just feels like it's been decimated. Like your sandcastle, your proverbial sandcastle has been destroyed, and your tools are all broken because all the things you relied on in your home country, like your identity, your personality, your skills, your sense of self, all of that seems either irrelevant or dormant when you come to this new country, because the first thing you're doing is trying to make sense of, okay, what is happening around me? What is this new environment? And you're not as funny, you're not as engaging anymore. The words or the language you're using a lot of times doesn't translate, even if you're speaking English. So for me, that's exactly what I felt when I came to the US at 12. I mean, kids were objectively monsters at that age anyway, but I was completely foreign to I was like one of 3 Indian kids in my school. And the second one was my sister. So there was only one other Indian kid. And it was just like such a complete and utter culture shock, because we didn't know what was happening. We spoke English, but no one could understand our accents or our very British Indian turns of phrase. And I just felt like a complete screw up all the time, because I was like, I'm not as good at school, even though I was a star student in India. I'm not as good at sports, because what are these kids like on? Like, what are these steroids these giant monsters are taking? Because I used to be a good athlete, and suddenly I'm just like, what? And then just in every way, I just felt completely ineffective, and I just felt like, I was popular. I was all these things in India that I suddenly wasn't. And so that stuck with me for a long time. And I only realized recently that on one of my solo trips, after I got divorced in 2021, and I went on this eat, pray, love journey of sorts. And I met this gentleman during one of my solo trips, and he ended up being a teacher who had been a teacher for a long time. And we were swapping stories about, just life. And so he said, one of the things I would say to my students all the time and he taught elementary school. So he said, every year when these 35 kids would file into my class, you could tell that some of them were nervous and they didn't know whether, what their place was in this classroom. And I would always turn to them and say, how many teachers do you see in this classroom? And they would invariably say 1. And I would say, no, I see 35 teachers. And it was because he was like, I want them to feel a sense of belonging the minute they step into this classroom. And I want them to feel like, and he said this one phrase that I wrote down, and I realized after he said it that, holy shit, that is my why. Because he said, nothing creates belonging, nothing gives you confidence like knowing you belong. So I was just like, oh my God, that is what I'm striving for with all the work I do now is to create that sense of confidence in people by first creating a sense of belonging. Because that is something I lacked for at least 2 decades when I first moved here. And so it took me a long time to really feel comfortable in my own skin. But that's because it took a long time for me to feel like I belonged. So, yeah, that was a very long answer to what I do. But
no,
yeah.
I love it. I'm just processing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning there. Wow. So the way I relate it is my father and parents were the ones that like the actual true immigrants that came over. And so I'm like the first one of my family born here in the States. So I have some connection to the immigrant experience, not a direct connection, but as far as my parents, I got to see a lot of that and also see so many of friends and family live it in the first space. So the fact that you are, at 12 years old, a true immigrant here to this country is incredible. And I think let's just take a moment to just recognize how far you've come, since then. But I can completely relate to that analogy of what a great metaphor with these sandcastles, as far as that feeling that you're so far behind, and that feeling that everything that you thought made you is now torn away, taken from you. There's no getting it back. There's no way to go back at that point. This is like where you're stuck at, right? And the weather alone would be crazy enough to switch from one to the other, especially Cleveland, Ohio. Like, I don't know how much diversity there is there, but you guys probably increased it by 300,000%.
I know, yeah.
I'm curious. Okay, well, several things. So I like the reframe of having, instead of a group of students, a group of other teachers in that class. I think it's really good. It helps all the other students also take a moment to appreciate their fellow students, not to belittle them. And I love that reframe of confidence is when you feel where you belong. And so much of the advice, right, is, fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
But that true confidence only comes when you actually have the piece of, no, I'm here, I belong. And almost the self-image, right? The story we tell ourselves that even if you are an immigrant or even if you are here, you still belong here. Yeah. I'm curious. So first off, with your sister, because it might have been different had you been like an only child.
Yeah.
Did you at the very least you had someone to maybe share that experience with? What was that like? Did it feel at least a little less lonely having her throughout this journey?
Oh, I love that you asked that. My sister is my best friend and we're just 2 years apart. So we were always super duper close. And I think she was really who got me through those initial years. But it was also, it's interesting because I think about this a lot now. I probably wouldn't still have my accent if I didn't have a sibling, because it's actually very, like, a lot of people comment on this. Even in India, they're like, wow, how do you still have your accent? Because everyone who moves at that age especially, and even now, like, people tend to code switch, which is, they feel this pressure to assimilate and to conform and to speak in a way that they'll be easily understood. And no shade, I totally understand why that needs to happen. It's a survival tactic, right? But for me, for one, my mom always kind of drilled it into us. And now she's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, you absolutely did, mother. So she would always have this pet peeve, because growing up in India, we had this total fascination and more like obsession with Western culture. And to a point where it was really belittling to our own culture. Like, we would sort of degrade and belittle our own culture and not value it because we were constantly looking to the West and saying, wow, look at those cool people with those cool American or British accents, or, they're so modern and so hip and all this stuff.
The superior, inferior type
It was a
vibe,
total like post-colonial hangover that we had. And so even all our celebrities would put on fake American or British accents, even if they had never set foot outside India, just because that was a sign of, it was a status symbol. We would import all our, like, back in the day, like MTV VJs and stuff were big. Like, those were our first influencers. Wow. And it was all like Canadian, American, British citizens whom they would bring over, and like Indian, but still, whatever, non-native born. They would bring them and have them be the MTV VJs and stuff. And those were the things the people we'd aspire to. And so my mom had a real problem with that, rightly so, because she was like, in the process, we are like ignoring our own cultural impact, and we're not respecting our culture. So she would hate when people would just go overseas and immediately put on this accent. And so her words really stuck in my head. So one of the things was, okay, I have my sister and we can, and also because I didn't feel that sense of belonging. I was completely ostracized when I first moved to the US. So I just didn't have that many friends to hang out with and to sort of influence my way of speaking. And because I didn't feel accepted or like I belonged, I clung to my Indianness. So I sort of went the other way, and we just spent all our time at home with our family and our family friends around other Indian people because that was our safe space. And so that didn't really help our adjustment period because we just became like super Indian in the process. So yeah, and I mean, because I had my sister, I didn't really need to make that extra effort because I was like, okay, I always have this ready-made best friend in my corner who is going through exactly the same stuff I am. So yeah.
Wow, what a cool, I understand also the mix of like both it being a refuge, right? Like a safe space for it, but also because it does kind of limit or inhibit like actually, I mean, it's that huge question of assimilation, right?
Yeah.
Like, so for me, just relating to you, I don't know if I've ever gotten criticized, but a lot of people notice that I don't really have an accent, even coming from like a very like Texan town.
Yeah.
And it's not even like a Latino, like orale, right? Or like a really intense Texan accent, Hey there, little lady.
That was good.
Right? So I spent a lot of time making funny accents, but for me, I don't even know where it originated from, but I just remember, for me, I wanted to speak like proper English, and I have a huge love and respect for the language. But with that being said, it's also how do you respect your history and culture? So for me, I got very lucky where I would go back to Mexico every single year, and at home we only speak Spanish, and so like it's like all the cultural holidays, everything's like very properly observed. So my parents did the most that they could to keep that that culture alive. It is different me being the second one now, like in a sense. I'm curious now, and I commend you actually because so many people either would try to cover up in a sense that vulnerability of feeling that they don't belong, feeling that cultural superiority, inferiority, right? Like the battle there. But it really sounds that you found strength in that, and because you have personally lived it, it means so much more coming from you to share and empower others to like help them on their journey.
Yeah.
So when did that start going? When did the portion of you helping other immigrants find their voice or become more confident by belonging? When did that start? How did that come about?
So I don't know exactly when I started to... this is really strange.
Yeah.
You know that movie Hitch?
Yes, yeah.
Really terrible.
I just watched it for the first time like 2 weeks ago.
It's quite garbage. But
Garbaggio.
But it's like, an entertaining whatever, the Will Smith movie. So when I watched that, I was like... For some reason, some switch went off in my head where I thought, okay, so he's in the movie, he's this guy who's really smooth and suave and whatever. And he's like, I want to help other, I guess, less smooth and suave people adopt those mannerisms and whatever. So they're more successful with women. And it comes from a point where it comes from his own insecurity, right? Because he used to be that person.
Yes.
He used to be that dweeb. And so... for me, I sort of likened it to my own experience where it happened. For me, it was about my immigrant experience and my not understanding the culture and making a lot of, I guess, social, just a lot of slip-ups socially and behaviorally because I just didn't understand the culture. And so then I thought, if I could only be the Hitch for immigrants, where I'm helping them.
The Hitch for immigrants. Like, that's the new motto.
For a second thought that was going to be like my life's journey. And I was like, this is going to happen someday in the future. Yeah. And I started in my head calling myself the immigrant whisperer because I thought, okay, I figured it out the hard way. It took me about 2 decades to figure out how to break through and be culturally and both in terms of the culture and communication and all these things. Now, I mean, this is going to sound like a total humble brag, but when I mentor people in Toastmasters, a lot of times it's, immigrants who are struggling with those social or cultural barriers. And I'll ask them, okay, who are some of the people you look up to in the club, whom you want to emulate? And of course, one of the people they always say is Rudy, because they're like, what voodoo magic is happening in his brain that he can just like have this poetic delivery all the time. But also they'll be like, we really look up to you because you just have this ease ease with which you talk to people and this humor and all the stuff. And in my mind, I'm always going, oh, wow, really? Because to me, it's like, yeah, that took a while and it was never a deliberate thing, but it's just because I was constantly watching and observing and I messed up so much and I documented that then I was learning through, I don't know, just without even really putting a lot of effort into it. But just because I would write down journal entries and I'd listen to a lot of podcasts and all this stuff, I was just imbibing a lot of the stuff without it being deliberate. So now I felt like, okay, now that I have these skills, and if people associate that with me, why not teach that to other people and help them get over that cultural and, communication hump a little faster? Because it should not take anybody 2 decades to figure out. So I can just help shorten that time period.
I want to take a moment to commend you for the compliment you gave me. No, what a great compliment.
Because I am awesome.
What a great compliment. No, I want to commend you because I think if I can help deconstruct it a little bit, and this is something I noticed. This is something I noticed from the very first time I saw you speak, but it always just keeps improving every week. Is there is not just a naturalness, but there is like a self-acceptance for you that I've realized that not many people. I think it's accessible to all of us, but it doesn't come to any of us without like a lot of pain, a lot of hard work, and a lot of like inner reflection. And so for you, I can tell, and you sharing your story, both the struggles that you had to go through, plus like the woman you've had to become, has helped shape that. And it's like the acceptance of, I think I spoke about this yesterday's evaluation, where it's not this perfect image that people are looking for. It's an authentic image, right? But the confidence in that authenticity, right? And you have done a really good job of taking what makes you this immigrant experience, also like the YouTube experience, like all these different aspects of your life. I know there's so many more. The love of arching comics, right? Informs who you are. And I think by that being an example, it shows that, this is possible, right? I mean, I know for myself, even just being here, growing up, obviously I had to like learn so many things for my parents and, translate so many things. And for me, I felt very much like that first wave of, that's why I connect so much, even though I wasn't like the first generation immigrant, I still connect a lot to that story. Cause like, I didn't know even like how to apply to colleges. I didn't know like all the whole process of things. So much of my life has been learning and catching up as well. And if that's my experience, like what is it like for a true immigrant that is here to like it's truly a whole different world. And so I just want to commend you for that. Right. And the fact that now you've used it to help other people kind of shorten that time window and kind of, galvanize that. Now, I want to kind of switch gears here as well, where now moving into the speaking space, right? So, of course, helping other individuals, but like in speaking now, sharing your story, sharing your message, what is that adventure like? And can you share some moments along the way?
Yeah. Let's see. I think my first thing was I had to figure out what my true purpose was, right? And this sounds so like cliched and like dude bro, but it is something that, and I sort of jokingly say this, but one of the things I realized pretty early on is that I was always a misfit. I was always a little different from everyone around me. Being Indian, everyone around me was this high achiever who was going to Ivy League schools and, becoming a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And for a long time, I felt completely inadequate and I felt like there was something wrong with me because I was never taught that there's any other definition of success and that you can actually embrace the things that are within you and learn to amplify them. So when I thought of, okay, what do I bring to the table? What am I consistently good at? It was always, okay, you have creative skills, you're a good writer, you're good with people, and that's it. And I was like, oh, got it. I have zero marketable skills because I was like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not interested in math or science the way my peers are. And I certainly can't make a career out of it. So hence, there's something wrong with me. And so for a long time, I tried to force myself into these boxes. when I did my undergrad in hotel management because I was an idiot 17-year-old, and my sister was like, "Oh, you like food? You should go into hotel management." And I was like, "Okay."
That's a good idea. I'm down.
That's what I did without doing any research into what the reality of that industry was. So once I actually started working in it, I was like, "Oh, I'm not cut out for this because I don't like this."
Yeah.
Even though I love the food part. But then I also was around people who were making six figures straight out of school because they were going to engineering and, finance and all this stuff. So I was like, all I want to do is just join this league of overachievers. So my entire 20s was just me looking outside and comparing myself constantly to everyone else and coming up short. So I forced myself to get an MBA and went into oil and gas, which was the most adjacent to engineering thing I could think of. Yeah. And I was like, yes, I've made it. But I was miserable because that was never me. I was never tapping into my, true, unique skills and talents. So when I finally watched that TED Talk that changed my life, I finally was like, why don't I just try tapping into what I now call my misfit quotient? Why don't I tap into the things that actually make me different? And instead of brushing them under the rug, why don't I just try highlighting them and amplifying them and leading with them? Let's just see what happens. So then I went into social media. I became a YouTuber. All of those things happened because I was like, you know what? Screw it. Because the other thing that happened when I stopped looking around and trying to be everybody else was that I just stopped caring about what everybody else thought. So then when I was like, oh, I'm going to start this YouTube channel. I mean, my first thought was, who's going to want to listen to an Indian woman with an accent? But very quickly, I was like, what a stupid thought. Let me just try it anyway. Who cares? So then I did it. And I just kept putting myself in situations that were beyond my comfort zone. But at the same time, if I felt like I didn't belong, I would very quickly remove myself from those. Not because I was like, oh, that's uncomfortable, but because I was like, there are places where it's uncomfortable and I still get a sense of belonging. And there are places that just don't serve me. And I'm just not going to I'm just not going to try those out. So for example, oil and gas, not my comfort zone, but I also was not good at it. And I just wasn't in a situation where it allowed for my true talents to blossom. But yeah, so once I started to document all of this, I realized that, okay, there's something here that I'm actually going on a very deliberate path versus taking the path that was very much prescribed for me. So let me try and create systems out of, how maybe other people can do the same. So in order to be able to teach that, I need to document and I need to become really conscious of what I'm doing, where I'm learning all this information from, and how I'm putting it to use, and how other people can do the same. And then same with, once I started my speaking journey, I had to become very clear about my North Star. So I had to start writing down and I had over the years written down years of journal entries. So just going back to all of those and being like, oh, this is, and I kind of knew when I was writing down things, I'd be like, this is a pivotal post. I'd put in the title, pivotal post, come back to this.
Highlight this. Yeah.
So then going back and reading those, I was like, oh, this is where that idea came from, or this is when this defining moment happened. So then incorporating all of those into my talks. The other thing that I'm really, that I teach a lot and use a lot, and also use to diagnose clients when I try to understand, okay, what are their communication challenges? Where do they need the most help? Is storytelling. That is my number one skill I teach. It's the number one thing I gravitate to when anybody's a good speaker. I'm like, moth to a flame. I'm like, yes, this is my person. So yeah, I think storytelling is the most important thing ever. It's the best skill to teach. It's the best way to diagnose where somebody needs help in their own communication. It's everything.
I could not agree more. I can't remember where I came across it, but I think I came up with the word. I think the fundamental unit of being human is like the story.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that so much information, if I tell you, 5 times 5 plus 5 minus 15 is whatever, that's like, it takes a lot more processing power than to just tell you a story of 5 zebras with like 5 chicken. Oh no, like you could tell a story and like transfer that data so much easier. Like it's, or maybe you said it, they're a way of distilling data. No,
stories are data with emotion.
That's it. Yeah. Stories are data driven with emotion. Wow. Okay, a lot there. That what a share there. Okay. Here's all we'll say. So, man, there were a lot of great thoughts there. I think one of the coolest things in storytelling, in communicating your story, and in sharing it, in connected with the immigrant experience, because I've experienced some of it as well, and I know so many friends that have gone through this, is that it is coming from a good place. It's coming from a genuine place of love and care, many times from the parents or grandparents, of wanting to see their child succeed, right? Yeah. Like, where become a doctor, become an engineer, a lawyer. That's the only 3 options, really. Like, that is pretty much just that it. And what is unfortunate, though, is that it can be so close-minded or so narrow-minded that it doesn't allow for any other opportunities of success. Yeah. Where many times there may be some. And unfortunately, I think part of that also is, in coming to this new country, it's almost like only seeing LA, New York, or like Dallas, or like the big cities. Like, sure, these are big cities, but there's so much more here as well. Yeah. Especially now today, being this age of the internet, where people, I mean, there was a dude who became a millionaire by mailing potatoes. I don't know if you heard, here in Texas, like in like the Plano area. It was like a college student that randomly started mailing a potato as a joke, and he would mail a potato, and like he started a whole online thing where you, I don't know, purchase a potato for $10, and then he'll start mailing it, and he's mailed like hundreds of thousands of potatoes and became a millionaire by just mailing potatoes, right? Amazing. But okay, that's a thing. That's a thing that can happen now, right? That's a thing that can happen now. Now, I do think, though, that the path is not as clear, right? To become like an engineer or doctor, right? It makes sense, right? It is still somewhat of a risk of kind of going the other way. But I would say so is the risk of not living. Like, so many people, I can't tell you how many people that became engineers or doctors and live this quiet lives of desperation that don't, sure, they may have like a nice bank account, but they don't have like the nice actual like fulfilled life. Yeah. And I also understand the give and take as well too, where at least for me, like the Mexican experience, it is very much driven in hard work. It's very much driven in providing for your family, and I think that is commendable and being respectable and honorable. I don't think you should, don't be a magician if you can't provide for your family, right? Like, figure that out first. But it does negate so much of what it means to be a human. Like there's this great quote of, I believe it applies to Italians, to Spanish, where, especially here in the U.S., we like live to work and they work to live. Yeah. And that's why, like, it's not that serious. Like we there's so much more at stake here than just a job. Yeah. Now, if you can convert something in your job to something you love, then even all the better, right? Now, I want to talk about something very, very important that came up earlier. Archie comics.
Please.
I'm a huge fan of Archie. Archie comics. It's kind of random. That was a cool little point there. But it does go into a deeper point as far as that the idea of like the cultures being above or below, or this aspirational thing. In Mexico, it's actually very much the same in India, where the highest of society emulates a lot of American culture in both how they wear, how they talk. The slang that's used is trying to emulate English slang. In your experience now being here in America, right, for so long, where do you find yourself feeling, as far as like in connection to your Indian identity? I know you recently returned for a wedding, I believe, to India. And you also got to speak as well, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. But where are you now in that identity as far as like American, Indian? Like have you made peace with it? Is it still like a turmoil? Where would you say you're at there?
It's really interesting, and I love that you asked that question. And now especially, it's becoming more at the forefront of my mind because I just got married to, my second husband, who's amazing. He's awesome. He's white. And so it's now sort of making me so much more aware of my culture, more than I ever was. And not in a bad way, but just in a way where I think it's just, especially when we first started dating, I suddenly became aware that, I'm dating somebody outside of my culture. So there were a lot of things that I had to sort of figure out. Okay, there were some things I had to teach him about Indian culture. There's lots that I'm learning about American culture that weirdly I didn't know after having lived here for almost 30 years. Like sports. I don't watch sports. I don't know what half these terms mean. And a lot of like very Texan terms and stuff. So, but then it's also, I had to have a conversation with him about, there were especially when we first started dating, I really felt a little bit of turmoil because I felt like there's this tug of war in me where I'm suddenly becoming aware that there's these two distinct identities. There's my American side and there's my Indian side. And in Houston, when I lived in Houston, I was around Indian people all the time. That was my default. And so I never really had to think about, how Indian am I being right now? Now, being first of all, in Austin, there just isn't as much diversity. I don't have my community here like I did in Houston. And now, like married to a white man, I'm constantly around non-Indian people. So now I feel like I have to make a deliberate effort, and I also have to strike the right balance because, also when you think about, when you joke about your own culture, it's one of those things where like the call is coming from inside the house. It's okay when it's Indian people making fun of other Indian people, but it's not so okay when it's like constantly white people making fun of Indian people. And sometimes you're like, oh, ha, ha, I'll laugh it off. But sometimes I'm like, no, not funny. Like I have to draw a line somewhere. So I had to have that conversation with my husband too, because I was like, sometimes I feel this need to laugh along with a joke or to be cool. But then sometimes I want to tell you that like, I don't want your family or friends. I mean, his family is awesome, but like, I don't want other people to think it's okay to make certain jokes in my presence because then I don't feel right going along with it. So and then I also was like, I want to get to a point where we seamlessly switch between Indian and American cultures and it's not such an effort, but at the beginning it is something we have to think about. So then we started doing things like, okay, let's have Indian movie nights. Like let's have him watch some Bollywood movies, or we'll go to India every year and we'll travel around, like even not just stay with family, but also go explore more so that we both, I get to appreciate my own country as a tourist and he gets to see it from my eyes. And so, it's now sort of becoming more of a conscious thing. But I feel like it's always an effort, right? It's always, especially when being around your people is not the default, it's always going to be something you think about. But as long as you, I guess, strike the right balance,
Yeah, because just as much as you are married to a white man, like he's married to an Indian woman. So there's like the culture has to, like kind of that balance. And I recognize a lot for me where, there was a big shift. Well, growing up, we would only speak Spanish, and then my brother started speaking English, like at home, and then there was a big shift because like there was legit like 1 or 2 years where they would speak English and I would speak Spanish, and like it was like a give and take, right? Because I realized like I'm really connected to the Mexican culture, and finally now we speak all English together. But if it's our parents together, then we all speak Spanish. But I have to make an effort to like listen to music in Spanish, to sing in Spanish, to still try and keep that alive, because I recognize if I go without it, my connection to the culture decreases, right? And I completely agree with that sense of like, I mean, it's fun to celebrate your culture, and there's some funny moments and everything too. But there's also sometimes where it clearly kind of crosses the line, and you're like, okay, I think I'm not I'm not an object here as well. Funnily enough, I don't.
Sorry, can I ask you? Do you think in English or Spanish?
What I found is that I am more precise in English because my vocabulary is so much more extensive, but in Spanish I'm more authentic. So emotionally, especially in relationships, like in Spanish I'm commute better like emotion wise, but in English I commute. It's almost like more raw or authentic in Spanish, but in English it's more like precise. Like if I'm thinking through a problem, I need to think through about it in English, just because my vocabulary just isn't. Even though I grew up speaking English and Spanish, I like never read classical literature in Spanish. Like the vocab and the framework isn't as extensive or expansive. Like I spend a lot of time just. Well, I used to read the thesaurus and dictionary in English just to like. This is where the freestyle rapping kind of helped out to kind of get. It's almost like everything in your tool belt, right? Yeah. So I can it's much different to be pessimistic than just to be angry, right? But in Spanish I couldn't really translate. Well, I could translate it, but it's a difference. It's still like if anger is a big thing, but like no, it's specifically pessimistic, or no, I'm feeling disappointed, right? So kind of a combination of both, I'd say.
Wow.
But funnily enough, I relate more to the idea of part of your identity being either criticized or mocked with magic. I can't tell you how many times.
Oh, I can imagine.
As a magician, oh my God, like when I meet someone new, it's just like, oh, you're a magician? Huh? Can you make my wife disappear? Right? It's
God.
like, yeah, you'd be so surprised. Like 90% of the time, like guys will say this, or
and you're like, ha ha ha, never heard
hey
that
guys,
before.
oh wow, you're so unique, man. Like, all right, hold on to your keys and wallets, right? Or just whatever it may be, right? It is an interesting perspective to be in, but also, I also don't blame people too much, unless if it's someone that I know, right? But like if I'm just meeting them for the first time, it's a different level of interaction than like a close friend or family member. I do want to mention, because you talked a little bit about it, how storytelling is one of your favorite aspects of speaking and rhetoric, and of course the storytelling podcast, which I got a chance to be on.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. Can you tell me a little bit more about that endeavor and how that happened and your hopes and aspirations for that podcast?
So the podcast itself, yeah. So storytelling became a big, I think, feature in my work when I started doing YouTube, because I realized that, oh, you need to tell stories to be able to hook people. And then when I started doing my video marketing agency, again, it was a lot of pulling people's stories out and having those long, in-depth conversations with them, and then pulling out those threads. And even if they insisted they didn't have a story, I was like, give me an hour and I will pull out your story. And so I realized that kind of became my superpower, being able to extract those stories from people. And then because, it would, through that process of interviewing them and doing those pre-interviews, I just built such a nice rapport with them that when we would get on set, we'd work with these big big shots at companies, like partners at Deloitte or CEOs of companies. And I would sit down and in the pre-interview and just the times that we were just bullshitting, they would be totally fun and carefree and whatever, fun conversations. And then the minute the camera turned on, it would just be like, oh my God, rigid and cardboard and just complete change. And you've noticed that too. So those in-between moments, when the camera turned off, in between takes or in between shots, that's when the real personalities and the fun stories would come out. So then when I thought about creating a podcast, I knew I wanted it to be about storytelling, because I wanted to teach. That's one thing I teach is, teaching even the immigrant professionals how to tell stories. That's never a thing that's emphasized to them. So I wanted to teach them, demonstrate from good storytellers. Yeah. And I wanted to capture the essence of those times in between takes or in between shots. So I called it Thoughts Between Shots, because I was like, I want to get those thoughts on camera. And so now it's just about, teaching people not only to tell good stories, but also to ask good questions, because that is such an underrated skill. And a lot of people I know are either introverts or just are shy because they have an accent or whatever. And they're like, well, Nammy, I don't have that ease of communication. So often I don't want to just go out there and just be like, hey, like, look at me. And I'm like, you don't have to be that person. Yeah. Just tap into your introversion or whatever it is. Just listen and ask thoughtful questions. And often that's all it takes for somebody to say, wow, I had a great conversation. You're such a good conversationalist. And it's not even because you said a bunch of really amazing things. It's because you asked really good questions and you listened. And that's all it takes often.
Are you familiar with the story? I'm going to mess it up. I can't remember exactly who it was, but there's a story of some famous dignitaries. And I believe it's the president's wife who's like telling the story. And she said I'm going to butcher this, but she met two famous gentlemen one night and had dinner one night, and the second night, right? The first night, it was like, oh, I met the most interesting man in the world. Like his stories were incredible. Like it was just so fascinating, right? But then the second night, we met the second person. She said, well, he made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. And what a difference, right? Like I think it's amazing to meet someone, incredible, and to like, kind of go off and brag and share like that. That's amazing. But even more incredible, I think, and even more long lasting is, can you make the other person feel like they are the most incredible person of all time, or also get them to see themselves in a different light. That alone, we hear it all the time, but yes, people don't really care. They won't really remember what you said. They will remember how you made them feel. Yep. That's a very classic idea, but I think that that has so much weight, because if you can make someone feel special, you can make someone feel seen and actually ask the right questions. One of the reasons I do this podcast is to try and get better at asking questions, because it's an exercise of, okay, what question hasn't this person heard?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think it's a very important exercise. When you, I'd like to ask this as we're kind of like winding down here. If you think 5 years from now, right? And let's say everything goes to plan, you know, like everything's fantastic, we rock and roll. Actually, funny, have you seen Riverdale, the TV show?
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched, I think, the first season, and
curious.
then when Fred Andrews died, I was like, I'm done.
I was actually curious about your take on that, because like it's like Archie comics, but like just completely like
I
let's
did
just
not
sexualize
like
it a
it.
ton and just like
No. Yeah.
it's like
no.
it's a little different than how it
Yeah.
was before. I've only seen I think like the first season, but anyway. But imagine, Nammy, 5 years from now, things go amazingly well, right? Can you kind of describe what that would look like for you as far as like the speaking journey, maybe people you've helped along the way? Take a moment to kind of envision what would that be like 5 years from now if things like really go really well in speaking wise?
I will have, I mean, for one, my speaking journey, I want it to be my main thing. So I want to be able to travel to different parts of the world and, you know, be flown to different keynotes and whatnot. I want to create a community of empowered immigrant professionals who really know how to communicate, how to advocate for themselves, and feel like, you know, they really know how to sort of market themselves and feel that confidence and that sense of belonging. I preferably will be in another country, just because my husband and I have talked a lot about moving to Europe at some point when we have kids and all of that. So that is a big goal for us. And just, I think community is becoming a big goal for me right now. Just because, you know, as you get older, you start to think of your own legacy and your own family and all of the stuff. And also just, I'm so conscious now that our parents growing up created this amazing community for us. And they constantly kept in touch with all our relatives and made such a point, like made such an effort to go visit people and to build this community around us. And we're just reaping the benefits. But what is our generation doing now to carry on that legacy, right? And I'm so aware of that now. So I think that's one thing I very much want to focus on, is community building everywhere I go, not just with family, but also with friends, with co-workers, colleagues, whatever it is. Just community building is a big part, and I hope that that just continues to grow and expand.
The community part is super important, because it's one of the only ways to really keep a culture alive too.
Yeah.
Like I feel that I know for me, we got really lucky with my family growing up in Sherman, Texas, where my father had 12 brothers and sisters.
Whoa.
And 9 of them moved to Sherman.
Oh my God.
So I grew up amongst like 30 or 40 cousins all together. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to repeat that, but just being close to other, or you know, it doesn't even have to be family necessarily, but just a community of people that are just in that same vibe, right? And I think that is so huge. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love Toastmasters, is that it's every week, like kind of you mentioned before, oh, these are my misfits, my weirdos, my misfits. And I really do want to see the misfit quotient. I know we talked a little bit about this before, like almost like as a whole thing. I see so much potential in that.
Yes, that is, I want that to be my signature. I'm developing that as my signature keynote and all of that, but I want that to be my thing, is the misfit quotient.
I think there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of potential there.
Thank you. With,
kind of as we're winding down, you have had such an incredible journey living the immigrant experience. You have such an incredible journey both speaking and like all the fun and all the rise and falls and all the chaos and chaos and beauty all mixed into one, right? If someone is an immigrant here, right, and watching this podcast, and they want just maybe one takeaway, something that they can do to help improve either how they communicate and how they show up in this crazy world of ours, what would be maybe just one takeaway they could take away that you would like to share?
Learn to tell your story. Learn to create a narrative and understand that you can control your narrative. And that's why I stress learning to tell your story, because it gives you an element of agency and control, because then you can, you know, regardless of how other people are perceiving you, you can then take control of how you're perceived by telling your story. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm going to leave some space here at the end. If there's anything else you want to share or plug, where can people find you? What would be the best way to reach out to you?
My website is nammysirur.com. You can find all my stuff there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a huge LinkedIn nerd. I live and breathe LinkedIn. It's very dorky, but that's where I am all the time. For anyone who feels like they have a really good story to tell, hit me up, because if you want to be on my podcast, Rudy has just been on it. So so hit me up. Give me a call. Connect on LinkedIn. That's the big one.
Nammy, this has been really incredible. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
taking the time and getting to know your story a little bit more and sharing your insight with everyone here. And I hope to continue this conversation in the future.
Yeah, and you are such a good interviewer and asker of questions and active listener that I hope you realize that that's why this is such a good conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We'll catch you guys next time on the next Rudy's Roundtable.